Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are out there in the world. I think it's that time to step out onto the high wire. I want to thank you all for joining me. We had a really heavy show last week, and I want to thank everybody that just blew up YouTube and made a viral sensation out of the Geert Vanden Bosch video. Truly, those of you that shared it, you are helping change the world and making the world a better place. And for those of you that don't know what I'm talking about, you better get back after this show and watch last week's show. But I want to start out a little bit lighter today. Let's lighten it up a little bit. Obviously, we all can do our work, but we also have to recognize there's real potential for the advancement of the world and the advancement of people. And nothing really, I think, represents that in some ways more than, watching this idea of, launching and getting to Mars, something that Elon Musk has been dedicated to. My understanding is also Jeff Bezos might get into the ring on this. A lot of people wanting to sort of expand, human experience to another planet. But as we've been watching over the last several months or years, SpaceX, it hasn't been going exactly as planned, right? I mean, if you've been watching some of these attempts to get a rocket that is ready to go to Mars, it's clear that they're having trouble just getting this thing off of the ground. That one looks like it did a little bit better, but luckily these are automated events, and we're watching these rockets, and nobody's being hurt by this. But as I was watching that, I was thinking, I wonder how long, is it till we're going to be ready to go to space, to go to Mars, to land on Mars, and we got a Mars rover there now. And I was shocked. I was shocked to see this headline just a couple of days ago. Take a look at this. This is from Science Genius magazine. SpaceX ready to send first humans to Mars. Now, it goes on to say, after what appeared to be several disappointing launches, you could say that, of SpaceX that ended in explosions, Musk now claims that they have figured out the problems with their rocket design and, as he said in a recent interview, we're ready to go to Mars. Okay, 1,000 volunteers have been whittled down to 100 people that represent every position that might be needed on a new planet, from building contractors to teachers and even a toilet repair specialist. But Musk made it clear, yes, these are just regular people, but they still will have to show some mental and physical fortitude in order to be among the final 30 that will be manning the historic launch. I mean, how big is this rocket? Anyway, when asked if the launch scheduled for this July 4th was perhaps a little hasty or even rushed, Musk replied, once the science is settled, once you know how to get the job done, I believe it is unethical to wait a single moment. The people volunteering for this incredible mission believe in me, and I believe in them. That's all that matters. Does anybody have a problem with that? I hope you do, because I wrote that article, okay? There's a fake article for anybody that's about to freak out or like throw yourself out of a window right now. We haven't lost it that bad. At least Elon Musk hasn't. But I'm trying to make a point. As I was watching those rockets blow up, and I was thinking, how long is it till we get to this dream of getting to Mars? I was also thinking about how many times did the animal studies blow up in the coronavirus development phases over the last 20 years, like every time. We literally saw the last rocket blow up. A day later, Trump's announcing warp speed into human beings, and we went right into giving it to human beings. And it didn't matter how many people got Bell's palsy, how many cases of anaphylaxis or people dropping dead in the first few days. We certainly didn't study it long enough to find out if there's going to be oxygen on Mars, or in this case, are you going to die of cancer or antibody-dependent enhancement? They haven't figured any of it out, but now hundreds of millions of people are being lined up, literally put on a ship to a future we have no idea what it will be. So when I was watching those videos, I think that luckily Musk clearly has enough funding on this, because he seems to, chuckle about it and says, if they did, he's expecting them to explode. He's learning something apparently from the explosions, and it's all part of the process. Whether or not that's good PR or not, there's this is a real article, Popular Science. SpaceX starships keep exploding, but it's all part of Elon Musk's plan. We expect it to explode, Musk has said. It's weird if it doesn't explode, frankly. It's weird to want to blow things up that are very expensive, but that's Elon Musk, okay? All right, but that's the point. We wouldn't accept someone putting someone on a rocket right now, yet we're doing that with this vaccine program. Emergency use authorization, no safety trials to speak of. We got to get a grip, right? How do we get through to people? And so anyway, that's what I was thinking about as I was watching these videos of the rockets exploding. All right, we have an explosive show coming up today. I'm really excited about some amazing guests. I got Kevin Barry, Esquire, coming in to talk about some draconian measures to take away your rights to opt out of vaccine programs in Connecticut. We're going to talk to the world famous Joseph Mercola, who's written a brilliant article on the Great Reset. We're going to discuss some of the investigation he did on that. And then I've got the head of V's for Vaccine, Joshua Coleman, joining me later to talk about a bill that I think is going to try to stop him personally in California. But first, it's time for the Jackson Report. You know, really, in many ways, if only the vaccine was as good as the rockets that Elon Musk was building right now. I mean, if all it did was maybe just kill a few people, we might be okay. After last week, I think a lot of us are wondering, is this just the end of all humanity, not just 100 people on a rocket? A lot of work we have to do, but what do we have in the news this week?
Yeah, cavalier comments from a person that makes me a little uneasy because he also dabbles in brain chips, but that's a whole nother story. Well, there's two conversations really that are super important that are taking place and unfolding as we speak right now. One is the ability to move about the world freely, unimpinged, not surveilled. And the other one is the freedom of very speech in the international town square, which is big tech.
Yeah.
So let's take a look at first the growing issue. We've covered this on the show a couple of times, but let's do a really deep dive into this because it's here now. Everyone's talking about the growing issue of certificates of passes to move about the country or internationally or just in your own community. Take a look at what's happening at Los Angeles Unified School District.
There's never been anything like this virus in our lifetime. Often, it's hard to see the effects it's having on our children. Has this conversation taken place in your home?
Mom, I'm scared about going back to school. I don't want to get sick, and I don't want to get you and Dad sick.
Our scientists tell us there are 3 things we must do to stay safe. Wear masks, make sure we social distance, and wash our hands. And now, your school, with the help of Microsoft Corporation, has created another. Introducing Daily Pass, your exclusive ticket for safely going back to school. Each week, you can schedule your free on-campus COVID test. The results are displayed in your Daily Pass. And if you choose to take your test off campus, you can post the results in your Daily Pass. And the moment vaccinations are available, you'll simply be able to schedule yours through your Daily Pass. But the real magic is your daily health check. Just answer a few simple health questions every day, and like magic, your entrance ticket appears.
Welcome back. Welcome to school. So, how did it go?
Dad, I have to admit, I was scared at first, but then I felt so safe. It was so good to be back. Thanks for keeping me safe. I love you so much.
Oh my God, propaganda much? I mean, that is absolutely horrifying, right? I mean, it's like they're making it like Disneyland. Why don't we just put an ankle bracelet on your child? I mean, is there anyone out there, are there really people out there that watch a cartoon like this and go, oh, I love that cartoon. I feel so much better about what's happening in school. It's crazy, clearly aimed at children, trying to make them realize that they should be afraid, and we're never going to get masks off of our kids if that's the way they're they're being brainwashed. I wonder, it would almost be. I bet you could probably include, an anal swab in there. I know my mom barely was able to get me out the door to get my peanut butter and jelly sandwich ready. It was all she could do to get it. Now we're gonna do temperature testing, anal swabs. Did I get your? Oh, hold on a second, honey. We need to get the swab done. Come back really quick before you get on the school bus. I don't know how parents are going to handle this. This is pure insanity. Absolutely insane.
Right. It has undertones of Willy Wonka, brought to you by Microsoft, like magic. The ticket appears. And you're right, minus the anal swab for now. You need a negative test. You need to show no symptoms. You need a temperature under 100 degrees. This is the first school district to pilot this program. And because of how many employees the school district has, it's really one of the largest employers to do this as well. So this is not, unfortunately, the first rollout we're seeing of this. We've reported on this before, but now we're seeing airlines begin to pressure the Biden administration and the White House to develop uniform guidelines. So this is the headline that's talking about that. It says vaccine passports. Airline industry asks U.S. to develop credentials for travelers. So we have it from the business aspect. And then we have the EU, and the EU is planning for digital COVID passports. Now, this plan looks like it's already well in motion here. EU announces plans for digital COVID-19 passport. This is a digital green passport. And it says in the article here, the European Union's rumored plans to develop a transnational vaccine passport are now a definite reality. The scheme would allow fully vaccinated travelers to bypass member states' current restrictions, such as 10-day quarantines and mandatory testing measures. And it's interesting. It's called the Green Pass. Some people could say green means green light and go, but it conveniently makes a sealed and delivered system in place in case the environmental overlay or conversation wants to come into this, because we've seen a lot of headlines saying how great these lockdowns have been for the environment. So that's something to watch out for in the future. And it doesn't stop in the EU. We have Canada. Canada is having an active conversation as we speak right now about this as well. Their headlines are saying, this is the health minister, Patty Hajdu, talks vaccine certificates as Tam, this is Theresa Tam, looks to optimism of inoculation rollout. Canada's health minister says requiring a vaccine passport to travel internationally is a very live issue. Quote, is being discussed around the world. I'm a member of the G7 health ministers. We meet every couple weeks. This has been on our agenda, Patty Hajdu said Saturday. Now, the G7 is France, Germany, Italy, Japan, the US, the UK. So they're speaking about this, and it's a live debate within those. It's not a live debate for the normal citizen that's going to have to shoulder these things, but it is for them. And we're even seeing it in New York City. They're starting to try this. This is more for venues, sports venues, but we have Governor Cuomo with all his issues. He announces pilot program testing the Excelsior Pass at Madison Square Garden and Barclays Center. So we're seeing a lot of these moving pieces, a lot of these moving puzzle pieces coming into play to paint a bit of a picture here.
All for a vaccine that apparently does not stop infection. They haven't been able to prove it stops infection, won't stop transmission. In fact, it's probably the best way to be an asymptomatic carrier is to get the vaccine. And now we're just going to put these people on planes, send them all over to spread the increasingly virulent and deadly virus that the vaccine apparently is helping to promote based on all the work we discussed last week. I mean, this is just, it's like Idiocracy. I don't know if anyone's seen that movie. It's just like how stupid, how big a mistake we're going to make here. I mean, we are just every week, it's like, let's just compound the mistake. Let's make it even bigger than we ever dreamed it could be.
Right. And as it stands right now, we'll go into this in a second. WHO seems to be on your side, on our side in that thinking. But another interesting thing that's happening here, China, it appears that China is making a kind of an international power move here. And it's all in this article. China to issue health certificate certs for travelers, open vaccination sites for citizens overseas. So it says China will also be setting up regional vaccination sites to inoculate its citizens overseas, Foreign Minister Wang Yi said at his annual press conference. Quote, we will introduce an international health certificate and launch the Chinese version of an international electric health travel document, he said, which will allow for verification of nucleic acid tests and vaccination records. So here we see that China really wants to set up hubs at, I'm assuming, international airports. questions, so many questions here. So are they going to be inoculating people with the Chinese vaccines, with Pfizer's vaccines, with Moderna? Where does the liability lie with this? Can U.S. citizens get inoculated, or will they get inoculated with this? This
And just
sets
how
up
about the fact that perhaps if we let this happen, China will be in control of deciding who gets to travel and who does not? Is this that move, the brilliant Great Reset we're all dreaming about, that where obviously the United States of America is no longer in charge? If Klaus Schwab and the World Economic Forum gets their way, China steps in and starts putting up little kiosks all over the world, and maybe our own administration will sit there and cut the ribbon with China and say they're now in charge of where you get to travel. Welcome to the new reset United States of America.
And it's interesting here, we rarely have WHO in lockstep, if you will, with some of the conversations we have here. We're typically always reporting on the antithesis of what they're trying to do and what actual science says. But the WHO is funded by China, by Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, by the United States once again. And the WHO is saying the opposite currently of what is happening in these G7 member states, Canada, across the US, China. So this is what they're saying in their interim position paper. This is the considerations regarding proof of COVID-19 vaccination for international travelers. It says, at the present time, it is WHO's position that national authorities and conveyance operators should not introduce requirements of proof of COVID-19 vaccination for international travel. And Del, here's to your point. It says a number of scientific unknowns remain concerning the effectiveness of COVID-19 vaccines, efficacy in preventing disease and limiting transmission, including for variants of SARS-CoV-2, duration of protection offered by vaccination, timing of booster doses, whether vaccination offers protection against asymptomatic infection, specific contraindications, and possible exemption of people who have antibodies against SARS-CoV-2. These are the natural immunity crowd. So they seem to be ahead of the game with this, with a lot of the open questions saying we can't even begin to roll out this surveillance network and this international travel pass network in any country, because this vaccine that we're basing it on, it's going to be the backbone of it. There's so many unknowns to it that it renders the travel passports mute.
It's incredible, actually, this week. Thank you, WHO. Never thought I'd find myself saying that. And just, you know, it sort of shows when I think we think of the they. We always talk about that we're up against the they, like it's this, you know, electric machine or the big brother, and they've got it all figured out. It's clear that there are still good scientists at these places. It's clear that China, that's funding WHO, is not getting WHO to say what China wants them to say. So it gives me hope that we still have human beings. There's still, no matter what you do, whatever world takeover you're going to try and attempt, you have this one, you know, slight problem. Human beings just are impossible to organize and keep on track, and they tend to, you know, fly, you know, by their own accord, their own direction. And many times these scientists speak up, and maybe, you know, Bill Gates or these people, they just can't control this thing the way they want to. So it's really great when every once in a while WHO makes some sense.
Right. And that's the next story here. The right to speak up, the right for these scientists to speak, for you and I to speak, for anybody to speak, for reporters to report. This is going to go back to Texas. So they took the masks off. They allowed masks off the residents' faces in Texas. But now Governor Greg Abbott is dropping a social media bill. So this is Texas Republicans take on social media titans and deplatforming bill. Dubbed Protect Free Speech and Social Media, Senate Bill 12 is backed by two of the most powerful figures in Texas state government, Lieutenant Governor Dan Patrick and Governor Greg Abbott. Under SB 12, if one of these companies blocked or restricted a user banned based on their viewpoints, the user could sue to get back on the platforms and to recoup attorney's fees.
Wow.
Now, this is big. This is
That's
big because
huge.
there's a federal conversation going on with this as well. We'll cover that in a second, but it looks like the states are moving on their own and not waiting for the federal government to do what they do or to do nothing. So North Dakota is moving on one that allows people to take civil action against these big tech giants for restricting the free speech. Utah, Florida, and Virginia also have bills that are all sorts of situations there, but basically it's protecting the free speech, not allowing algorithms to censor the speech, and allowing people to get their platforms back, or at least be heard to try to get their platform back if they're censored. But no one beats Poland. Poland is working on a bill, and this is probably a world's first here. Poland fights big tech with push to block social media censorship as well. Now it says here, social media companies that censor users or remove posts for ideological reasons could soon face fines in Poland in a world first attempt to curb the powerful big tech through legislation. Under the new legislation, any platform that bans a user would face fines of $13.5 million unless the content is also illegal under Polish law. The arbitration committee would be set up to oversee disputes. So there we have one of the biggest fines.
Wow.
In Florida, their bill basically talks about fining the tech companies $1,000 a day if they deplatform a candidate during an election year. But Poland just blows it out of the stratosphere.
That is huge. I never thought I'd ever, be, longing for something Poland has over the United States of America. Good for them. I mean, that's just awesome. And that's exactly the direction I think that these things should go. Let's put this in courtrooms. Maybe stand up for what you're saying. If it's misinformation, you should at least have to prove it, right? You can't just kick people, oh, it's misinformation. Really? Is it? Because as I've said, all we do here is share misinformation, the information social media is trying to hide from you and mainstream media. Well, I mean, that's hopeful. I'm glad Poland's moving in the right direction. Texas, yay for Texas. What's happening on a federal level here, though?
Well, at the federal level, it looks to be, well, I'll just go into the headlines instead of trying to just sugarcoat it here. The headline says Facebook, Google, and Twitter CEOs will make another appearance before Congress in March. This is March 25th. This is in front of the House committee. So what this looks like, we'll go directly to the House committee website, and this gives you kind of a flavor of what they're looking at here. And this is the committee announces hearing with tech CEOs on misinformation and disinformation plaguing online platforms. Don't like that word very much.
No.
Now it says, quote, whether it be falsehoods about the COVID-19 vaccine or debunk claims of election fraud, these online platforms have allowed misinformation to spread for far too long. Big tech has failed to acknowledge the role they've played in fomenting and elevating blatantly false information to its online audiences. So, we're going
back here in the good old USA, we're going to help the, censorship. We're going to go ahead and just come on in here, and we don't think you're censoring enough. Poland is going to fine you millions of dollars if they get their way. But here in America, we want to do the opposite. We want to go after those citizens, those people that we're supposed to be representing, make sure that they can't share any of their truths or their information with each other. That's outrageous. Right.
And here, right on their press release, right in their statement, it says vaccine misinformation. So medical information, scientific misinformation. So this is clearly the biggest threat. The election's over. No one's talking about that anymore. So we're talking squarely vaccine misinformation. And as you and I know, there's, as you said, misinformation, and there's facts that are inconvenient and inconvenient truth. So it's interesting. It kind of reminds me of that fairy tale, throwing the rabbit into the briar patch. The big tech giants are kind of looking for an excuse maybe to censor or hammer that stuff a little more and have some cover. And here comes the House committee to maybe do that for them. But we'll have to see what it looks like on March 25th. We'll see what kind of questions are asked, if they'll hold their feet to the fire, if they'll ask the hard questions, or if this is just going to be a dog and pony show.
Absolutely, man. These are crazy times. Jeffrey Jackson, thank you for that incredible report. Keep up the good work, and we'll see you next week.
All right. Thanks, Del.
All right. You want more and information, deeper information, more clarity on some of the conversations that are happening here, definitely check out the Jackson report at thehighwire.com. Those are written articles, and he gets into a lot of depth there. There's many ways that you can support the Highwire and the work we do in our nonprofit, ICanDecide.org. But one of the best ways is to not only support, but also show the world and express to the world where you're getting your information, where you find the truth. There's no better way to do that than at the Highwire store.
Introducing the all-new Highwire shop, where you can find your favorite studio gear essentials for everyone in the family.
We're out here today celebrating the release of our new Highwire gear. And so we've invited our Highwire community to show off the gear and see what we've got.
we're some of the biggest fans.
I get a lot of news from the Highwire. He's really getting the stories that we're not going to see in the mainstream news.
Made from the highest quality hemp, bamboo, and cotton material. Be brave walking down the street as you support the work ICANN and the Highwire do every week to bring you the truth.
The Highwire's giving people information that they otherwise would not have access to.
Those guys do all the work for us, find the truth for us.
Order now. Just go to thehighwire.com and click shop.
Support the Highwire.
As I promised you probably several months ago now, that the Highwire is going to start digging deeper into this concept of the Great Reset being pushed by the World Economic Forum and Klaus Schwab. We've played videos, we've interviewed people, but I read an article this week that absolutely blew my mind. This was in the publication that's put out by Children's Health Defense called The Defender. It's an amazing article that gets into a lot of detail. And it's written none other than probably the pioneer of health on the internet and social media, someone that has been under attack for many years and knows a lot about this. I'm talking about Dr. Joseph Mercola, and he joins me now. Dr. Mercola, first of all, it's an honor to get to speak with you. I think I've said privately, but I've never said it in public, when I was a producer on the CBS talk show The Doctors, my secret weapon was your website. While everybody else was trolling mainstream media, I would try to find stories, and one of the biggest stories I ever broke came from your website. So you've been at this. I've been following you for over 15 years, so it's an honor to have you on the show. But this Great Reset, I think just maybe 6 months ago even, we would have been called conspiracy theorists to bring it up. Now it seems like it's in broad daylight. What inspired you to write this article? Why is this important for people to know?
Well, it's our continuing effort to educate the public about the truth. And we continue to do that. I've been started the website 2 years before Google did, and Google's really behind much of this mess. They're responsible for largely collecting much of the data through their extensive network of browsers and internet software and search engines, and compiling it and learn exactly what drives our behavior. Through their very powerful and sophisticated deep learning algorithms, they can discern what behavioral triggers will cause the actions they want. And they've done that, and we were exposing some of this. And the article you reference is just a part of the bigger process where the parties responsible for implementing this strategy are very clever, using very powerful and well time-tested strategies, such as hiring public relations firms to implement their strategies. And these PR firms have direct connections with almost all of the major media, and they collectively collaborate and launch their campaigns. And many, they're aimed at targeting and discrediting people who are exposing the truth, like myself and you and many others. That frequently results in deplatforming and censoring on the search engines. So, but it's part of a broader narrative. I actually wrote a book that's going to be out next month on COVID-19 that really compiles much of the information and exposes much of what they're planning. We provide loads of great resources. We've been publishing on this for over a year now, since it came out. But it's a very clever strategy. They knew exactly which buttons to push. And one of the big kernels of truth is that it appeared, I mean, it's fear. Fear is a big emotional trigger. And they did it with this narrative about this dangerous, lethal threat that was able to shut down the global economy.
You've been in sort of this natural health arena and are famous for it. I remember when I was a kid, I was seeing a healer in Boulder, Colorado, that was a chiropractor. He also used naturopathy and homeopathy, and he was well known. And back then, I remember, because Boulder is very liberal, he would say to my mom, you got to watch these Democrats. They're going to try to make vitamins illegal. They're going to try to shut down my ability to use homeopathy. And of course, we were my family is very strong, progressive liberals. And I called him probably about, a year ago in the middle of this and said, how did you see this coming? In the middle of the world we were in, how did you know that they were going to come after vitamins and they were going to come after natural health? Did you see this coming too? And what were the signs everyone else was missing, if so?
Well, I think the person you're referring to is confused because it's exactly what they want. The people who are actually responsible for initiating this process want you to believe. They want us to divide into partisan divisions, and that separates us and has us fighting against each other. Instead of identifying and fighting against the real cause of the problem, which is the technocrats. These Gates would be the classic example. Fauci is another person, and there's a whole wide variety of people who are in organizations that are very wealthy. Klaus Schwab, as you referenced, World Economic Forum. They have their plans, and it's interestingly, and I'm sure if you've talked about Event 201, which is held 8 to 10 weeks before this whole problem started, where they predicted what was going to happen. It was all about the coronavirus. So these are the people, Johns Hopkins was part of it, Bloomberg. So these are the individuals that it goes way beyond that. And of course, suppressing any competition is part of their issue. And we have a FDA warning letter against me, which is part of the process. This was initiated by a company or a firm called CSPI. You may have heard of them before in the past, Center for Science and the Public Interest.
Yep.
This is a criminal, ostensibly public health organization that literally has responsible for killing tens of millions of people by taking out full page ads in the 80s, begging McDonald's and other fast food companies to stop using saturated fat in their French fries and fried foods. And instead replace it with vegetable oils. And my next book, which is coming out next year, will expose the most fundamental, foundational dietary element what is leading to almost every single chronic degenerative disease. And that's this increased use of vegetable oils. And they're responsible for initiating a large part of that. And they've literally killed tens of millions of people. Yet they perceive me as a threat. And I don't know who they're colluding with, but they sent this letter to the FDA last July, and it got some PR, and they colluded with the New York Times and the Washington Post, and it made a front page on that. But nothing happened because Trump was in office. Literally 2 weeks after Biden is inaugurated, they've got connections to the FDA, and they were able to get this passed. But nothing's going to happen from this because there's nothing there. We didn't violate any rule or law. We have very sophisticated legal counsel. Believe me, I assure you.
I believe you.
And we've got the best in the country. I mean,
let me just read an excerpt from that. I think we have it here just so that people know exactly sort of what you're being, accused of. Among a flurry of FDA warning letters was one sent to Joseph Mercola, DO, a controversial alternative medicine physician, for improperly marketing COVID-19 treatments. The agency told Mercola that 3 products he markets with COVID-19 claims, liposomal vitamin C, liposomal vitamin D3, and quercetin, and sterile still being advanced, are unapproved new drugs and misbranded drugs being sold in violation of the Food, Drug, and Cosmetic Act. I mean, just reading that, the fact that this is the first time I've ever heard them reference a vitamin as a drug. Is this some new tactic or language shift, or have I just been asleep?
No, it's technically correct. With respect to what the law is, you cannot advertise any supplement and make a claim. We never did that. We We wrote articles about intravenous vitamin C. We never said liposomal C can be used to treat it. And any of our articles that had a link here, you can buy here. We never did it. So that's why we're not nervous or worried about this. We never broke the law. And it's just, and then we talk, the vitamin D, it was peer-reviewed literature that we were referencing, and with no link to any product, which is providing information within the intent of the law, totally under the First Amendment rights and privileges we have of freedom of speech. So this is not going anywhere. We're not even going to generate a lot of legal fees from this because there's no basis for it. It's summarily dismissed. But they do achieve their goal, which is to get negative PR and discrediting because it looks like I'm a criminal, according to them. Because it's the government. They never make mistakes, right?
And that's really the goal, right? That when we search your name, like me, the top 10 searches say you're a quack, or in my case, spreading misinformation, undefendable science, all of these things, these fact checkers that nobody fact checks. This is the world we live in.
But this is just an example of what they're doing. It's just a discrediting campaign. It's a classic strategy. It's been used for very long time, very effectively.
Yeah.
because when you can manipulate the media, you can manipulate public perception. And that's what they're seeking to do.
Absolutely. So how, health is only one part of this, but because of this pandemic, it's become a very serious part. One of the things that, as you well know, I made the documentary Vaxxed, which sort of catapulted me out of my career at CBS working on the doctor's television show. But I really thought this was all about vaccines. In many ways, I was predicting there would be some sort of pandemic. I saw the biggest lobby in Washington is pharma. Started seeing that the lobbies all around the world was pharma. And as I was saying to audiences, pharma's out spending oil and gas 2 to 1. We're fighting wars in the Middle East. What is pharma going to get? But I have to say that I feel like really studying vaccines and focusing on it the way I have for the last 4 or 5 years is taking me down a rabbit hole that's saying that this is bigger than health, that this is one element, that perhaps it's the fear of disease that's going to bring in what you're calling the technocracy, that it's really Silicon Valley getting involved here, and passports and microchips and tracking us. Is that something that you think happened just sort of out of necessity for the opposite side, or was this always a part of the plan? Is this opportunistic thinking?
No. This is part of the plan for probably well over a century. Patrick Woods has done a lot of work on this. He worked with an author, Anthony Sutton, who really exposed a lot of this work with the Trilateral Commission. And they started this in the 70s, but prior to that, it really was in the 1930s. So the Council on Foreign Relations is another component. So this has been going on for a long time, and it doesn't matter what the political party is because they control both sides. So it's independent of that, and it's really all about controlling and transferring the wealth. I mean, we know that there has literally been trillions of dollars of wealth that has been transferred to the wealthiest people on the planet in the last year. In the last year, it's crazy. And the wealth of the middle class and lower is just diminishing. So, they've got this incredible plan. It's very sophisticated that I don't know that they'll get away with, because I think I'm really hopeful that we've got a strategy to counter this, that they can't not block. And it's actually related to technology, because the internet was one of the greatest innovations in the development of human history, but they've taken control of it because it's centralized. It's on certain servers that they have control over, which is the meaning of central. There's one or a few organizations that control it, but when you switch it to a centralized system, very similar to cryptocurrency like Bitcoin, which it cannot be controlled by any one person or organization, then you have a lot more freedom and essentially elimination of any potential for censorship. So there is an emerging number of very sophisticated technical individuals and people of significant wealth who are behind this. And I'm in the process of collaborating with them and making sure this solution comes really soon, but it won't be, as soon as possible will be more accurate, because it's going to take a few years to develop. This is essentially a major change in the internet, which is what's going to be required. It'll probably involve the blockchain too.
Have you been dismayed at all, given that, I grew up in natural health, yet I find most of the people that I was in, now I get it's not really party oriented, but it does seem like, Whole Foods is where I would go to buy most of the things you would recommend in your newsletter. And here we go to Whole Foods, and Whole Foods took, for instance, colloidal silver off the shelves when people started using it. We're starting to wonder, I couldn't find zinc the other day. It's like, have they banned zinc from Whole Foods? But the sort of granola moms or, and the anti-vaxxers that might have, followed some of the work you do, but it's that sort of natural health community, not the anti-vaxxers, but a lot of them are really pro-vaccine. Like, it seems like California and Colorado, these places that, were bastions for natural health and good food and organic living, seem to be more dedicated to this vaccine program than anybody else. How do you explain that? I mean, you've been working and speaking to these people for so long.
I would disagree with that. The two examples you related, Whole Foods is owned by Amazon, Jeff Bezos. So that explains that. And the ostensible shift of anti or pro-vax in California is more related to control of the legislative lobby. There was a massive opposition to the change in the laws and removal of philosophical exemption that occurred either last year or the year before last, that eliminated that exemption. And because California was very progressive in that area, and there was some of the most sophisticated and parents were in the Silicon Valley area. The vast majority of the Silicon Valley parents were opposed to vaccination. But unfortunately, the legislature is absolutely controlled. It's a massive blue state. And not that this is a partisan issue, it isn't. I know. But that tends to be the party that implements this more aggressively. Yeah. Because Republicans can do it just as easily. Because this technocracy is on both sides of the system. They control both sides for the most part. I mean, there's a few independent politicians, but there's very few.
How do we move forward? I mean, so many people can feel debilitated. When you're writing articles, you're obviously trying to wake people up. What is the goal? How, are we outnumbered? Are we outmanned?
No, we're not. We outnumber them massively. There's no question. They have some very clever tools, very sophisticated technology that allows them to manipulate brainwash with propaganda very effectively. It is really shocking how much they were able to deceive and convince the public to get this vaccine. I mean, it just surprises me. But there's a fair number of people who understand the truth and recognize that we had a head start. I mean, my website was out before Google started. It existed. Right. And a lot of it's been on the web for a while, and we have a significant numbers of people, millions of dedicated individuals who understand where they can find the truth. You will not, this is new to you, you will not find it in the search engine. We're just not there, but you can find it through a friend. So the information is still there. We're not taken off of the internet. So that's one thing. So you can just have to find your trusted sources and review them regularly, and you'll find the truth. Just do not rely on mainstream media. It's going to be a prescription for disaster. So that's part of it. And then the other is to recognize that you don't want to share your private information and get off of platforms like Google, which includes stop using their search engine, stop using their Chrome browser, stop using the Android phone system, because they're capturing your data and they're using it to manipulate you. And, and I've documented this extensively with interviews with Robert Epstein, who's a Harvard sociologist, and there's videos we put up with Shoshana Zuboff, who's a Harvard professor, that documents in her book Surveillance Capitalism. We describe how you can get off of these platforms and use the existing ones, and just be aware that there's going to be alternatives that are coming out. They're going to eliminate the censorship. There's going to be gradual transition to what we're calling Web 3.0, and it's coming. It's just going to take some time.
I agree with you. I mean, I know that there's a lot of panic, but we've had the same thing. Our audience found us. They were able to type in www.thehighwire.com, and we've got millions have moved over. So all of that, in the end, it takes a little bit more effort. When you look at this vaccine, and I too am blown away. I mean, think this, just last week we saw the Supreme Court all got it. I think the Dalai Lama just got it, and and Dolly Parton apparently too, and other musicians, Willie Nelson. And I just, in the back of my mind, and I know
they identify celebrities because they're very powerful influencers.
Do you look at it the same way I do, which is when I look at these safety trials, there are multiple ways that this vaccine could destroy countless lives. And
it already has.
Do you wonder what the world looks like when hundreds of millions, if not billions of people have taken a product that was never tested for safety and proves to have incredibly deadly long-term effects?
It's a very, very effective, potentially effective depopulation strategy, or certainly injuring the public health. There's just no question about it. We both know very well that the reported deaths, the reported complications of a vaccine, Tavars, is 1%. Right. 1%. And here's the interesting component. If you came down, or if you had a positive COVID test, which was absolutely bastardized, they had cycle thresholds that were increased from something like 25 to 40. So it makes almost everyone taking the test positive, falsely positive. If you had a positive test and you died from a motorcycle accident, you died from COVID. No, that's not controversial. That's what happened. But on the converse, you get a COVID-19 vaccine and you're healthy and you die the next day. Oh, just coincidence. Just a coincidence. Nothing, couldn't possibly be related. That's
Yeah.
what happened with Hank Aaron. He died 2 weeks after the vaccine. 2 weeks. Oh no, we did an autopsy. It wasn't anything to do with the vaccine. Yeah, of course it wasn't.
What are you at in the thought of, is there evil in this world? Are these people that are driving this, these technocrats, this small group of people, are they evil people, or are they just arrogant, egotistical?
That's a great question, and it kind of reverts down to philosophy. And to call someone evil is to be judgmental. And I seek to avoid being judgmental because they have got their reasons. They may think they're doing it for the right cause. I mean, they're implementing these strategies for the greater good, as a justification. So
Right.
I hesitate to do that, to call them evil. I think they're maybe misguided, maybe more accurate. But it's certainly not aligned with what my perception is the ultimate public health benefits.
When we look at, you talk in this article about synthetic food. Now, I don't know what your diet is. I don't know if you're mostly plant-based. I haven't, how you focus there. But the idea, when I look at friends of mine that are vegetarian that love like this new Impossible Burger, I think I don't care where you're coming from. Why would you be eating synthetic food? That can't possibly be the better way to go.
Well, actually, I'm not plant-based. I'm actually mostly carnivore.
Okay.
And not that you can't be healthy being plant-based. I just think it can be healthier if you don't. So it's an interesting observation about the synthetic foods. You clearly want to avoid all synthetic processed food. That's one of the most important principles to stay healthy. But interestingly, with this synthetic meat, which is clearly a big push of Gates and a variety of other technocrats, as ostensibly a regenerative green approach. What you just can't magically make this out of thin air. You've got to have raw materials and ingredients. So what are they using to make the synthetic meat? The most important variable you have to focus and concentrate on is the fat, the specific fatty acids they're using. They're using soybeans and canola to provide the fats to make for the substrate to make these things. So that in alone is the primary reason why this is going to kill you more radically. We know that vegetable oils are probably the single most pernicious metabolic poison you could possibly eat. I'm actually writing, that's my next book is coming out next year. There's a specific omega-6 fat called linoleic acid, which just absolutely disrupts your mitochondrial health and energy and is probably the primary contributor to almost all chronic degenerative disease. And when you are eating synthetic meat, you are getting massive amounts. Depends on which one you eat, Impossible Burger or Beyond Meats. One uses canola oil and the other uses soybeans. Yeah, so, and that could be up to 50% of it, the fat is linoleic acid. And when you're eating real meat, ideally grass-fed, but even better, you're getting less than 0.5% linoleic acid. So, which is exactly what our ancestors ate. I just did an interview today with Paul Saladino, who just came back from Africa. He visited the Hadza, who are one of the few hunter-gatherer tribes. I mean, there's literally only 100 people of these tribesmen around. They're running around. All they're eating is pretty much meat and tubers, and that's it. And they have like no disease. They have no disease. It's crazy. And they're always happy, which is the most amazing thing. It's just they live this lifestyle that they just don't get sick. They're incredibly anti-fragile because they're doing the right things. And we are so far from doing that here. And we just addicted to the conveniences of modern life. And as a result, we suffer the health consequences, and we have more susceptibility to developing not only chronic diseases, but acute infections like COVID-19 or any other viral infections. And this is an interesting point I want to get in before we finish, is that in the book and on my site, and if you haven't been to my site, I implore you, or even go to this other site, stopcovidcold.com, all one word. It's a site that I put up. Actually, it's in the FDA warning letter. They want me to take it down because I'm not selling anything on the site. I'm just giving away free information based on a peer-reviewed article that I had published in the journal Nutrients last October that provides people with information, historical context of why vitamin D is so expensive. So vitamin D is huge. That's probably one of the most important to do before. Make sure your level's up between 60 and 80 nanograms per milliliter. Ideally sunshine, but supplements will be more, can work. And stopcovidcold.com tells all the details. You don't have to submit your emails. It's not an email grab. It's just giving you information to help you and your family. But then the other thing is Nebulize hydrogen peroxide, which is there's videos on my site that tell you to do it because the devil's in the details. But essentially, it's similar to what you'd buy at the grocery store. So it's like $1 a bottle, but you do it like 30-fold decreased concentration, 0.1%, not 3%. And you have nebulize and just breathe it in like every hour if you're sick. And it's virtually, I mean, Brownstein's done some clinical trials. He had published with a study with 100. Now it's up to like 200. He had no deaths in his population where he was treating COVID patients. It's probably the single most potent intervention, the safest and the least expensive, except that you've got to get it before. So, someone in your family is sick now we're emerging into the summer. So the incidence of COVID is like disappearing, but having this as a tool for not only COVID, but any other acute viral infection that comes up is just important. So you got to pick up a nebulizer and have it ready so that, you don't have to go searching for one when you need it, because the sooner you do this, the better. And here's an interesting too. You've heard about or talked about the long hauler syndrome. Yeah. And I've interviewed Dr. Zelenko, who's a physician in New York. He treats many of the Hasidic Jewish community, and he's responsible, of course, for popularizing the hydroxychloroquine protocol. And he's been vilified and discredited too. But what he taught me is that, this is interesting because I wasn't aware of this. This long hauler syndrome is essentially never happens if you are able to treat the virus within the first 5 days. Treat it in the first 5 days effectively. No long haul. He's had thousands of people treated, like no long hauler syndrome in someone who's treated in the first 5 days.
Well, that brings up an important question, because I've had friends that that do come down with this, and I've always been a natural health guy. I'll go with the quercetin, the zinc, but I wonder, if I don't know if I'm going to be one of those serious people. And I've had a friend that they end up getting the serious case, and then you bring in the ivermectin or the hydroxychloroquine, maybe budesonide. Would you ever recommend going that pharmaceutical route up front, or do you think you can always get this thing naturally?
I personally abhor taking a drug unless it's absolutely necessary, and in this case, I don't think it is. I think the inhaled nebulized peroxide, especially within the first few days, is all that you need. But you certainly, if you haven't been doing vitamin D, you want to take a high dose of vitamin D, maybe 50,000 units. Just to boost it up really quickly. So vitamin D is clearly an important component. I think zinc is an important component, and taking it with a zinc ionophore like quercetin, which hydroxychloroquine might have some other benefits, but it's hard to get. It's expensive. It's not that expensive, but it requires a prescription. It's just more difficult to obtain. Quercetin is not. So that's easy to do. And zinc, you could take, if you're symptomatic, you could take things like NAC, N-acetylcysteine would be another thing, even things like melatonin, which has been shown to help. But you can use adjunctive therapy synergistically. But when I'm taking care of people locally who have this, not as a practice, but friends or relatives, I just do the nebulized peroxide. I haven't seen anyone fail that yet. So, I mean, it's the single most effective strategy.
All right, that's good to know. So lastly, you obviously are incredibly well read. You're always writing books. You've dedicated your life to the health of, not just Americans, but around the world. How do you see this moving forward? And you're coming to us from Florida. People are flooding into Florida because there seems to be more freedom there. They're flooding into Texas. Is that the answer? Are we going to isolate and build islands that maybe push back, or how do we get through this great reset alive?
It's a very good question. I haven't really directed a lot of serious thought to answer that question specifically, other than to educate people about what the truth is, and then they can make their own decisions. Personally, I would highly recommend getting out of one of the tyrannical blue states. Like, I was born and raised in Chicago. I lived there for the first 55 years of my life. And I not only moved down to Florida personally, but I moved my business down several years ago. And that was a really, really good decision, not just for tax purposes, as we know, for personal freedom. We haven't had to wear a mask here. It's not mandated. I mean, it's sunny, so you get vitamin D. So I think from that perspective, if you can Florida is a great state. I like it better than Texas because I happen to like the ocean. And, there's certain sections in Texas, like, Austin's becoming real popular, but it is way too progressive. It's like a mini California out there, and it's not close to the ocean, but just, you have to do something that makes sense for you to find these enclaves, because ultimately community is a big part of the picture. You've got to have a strong community around here, and Florida is not known. They're not a natural health community by any way, shape, or form, but they're a free state. And if you have freedom, then you can develop the resources you need without being obstructed by the governor. And our governor is just totally committed to freedom. I mean, he's probably one of the leading candidates for running for president next terms.
I think you're right. What's the best thing people should do for their health right now? We're coming to the summer. You've said vitamin D, these protocols, get out in the sun.
Well, the simple things. Okay.
Yeah.
So who dies from COVID-19? Obviously, age is a really big, important factor. But the second one is metabolic inflexibility, the ability to seamlessly transition between burning fat and carbohydrates as your primary fuel. So what are the two things you want? But the most important thing you can do, doesn't cost you a penny, is to do something called time restricted eating, so that you take your eating window and gently and slowly compress it down between 6 and 8 hours. Most people eat more than 12 hours a day. And just doing that, not even changing your foods, but I, of course, recommend changes to healthy foods would be helpful. Now, the second most important thing about the diet and metabolic flexibility that you can do is this is no question, you have to eliminate every vegetable oil, not that's in your house, but it's in the food. So you have to read the labels. Ideally, don't buy any processed foods. Be really, really careful about eating in restaurants. Obviously, many of them are closed now or shut down or out of business, but fast food restaurants aren't closed, and that's almost all they use. So never any fried food. It's like it's the worst food you can eat. It will absolutely accelerate your progression to death. So
just out of curiosity, is olive oil a vegetable? Is that a vegetable oil?
Technically it's a fruit oil, but olive oil is a good example. And in my new book and on our site, we go into this. Most of olive oil is adulterated. 80% of it is absolutely adulterated. They adulterate with cheap oils like safflower oil, which is 70% linoleic acid. So that is something I would avoid.
So what's the best oil?
High quality olive oil, the kinds you get in these specialty stores, and it's very expensive. I don't know, $30 a quart or something or more. Then maybe a tablespoon a day is fine. I mean, it's anything in moderation is typically okay, especially if it's a natural and processed food. So olive oil would be exception, but coconut oil works. Butter is great. Beef tallow. So you just got to be careful, and taking high amounts of seeds and nuts can be problematic too, because most of them, with the exception of macadamia nuts, are just loaded with this omega-6 fat linoleic acid. So doing that, making sure you get your vitamin D levels checked. It's probably a lot lower than you think it is. The only way to know is like your blood pressure. You don't know what your blood pressure is until you measure it. You got to measure your level. You make sure it's over 40. 40 is the bare butt minimum. The doctor, I have people who know that, or at least know they have to do vitamin D. They go to they go get their blood levels checked. It's like 25, and the doctor tells them it's normal because the normal low is 20. That's what they put in the conventional reads, and it's not. It's a lie. It's supposed to be between 60 and 80, but they don't have the right normals. That they have our averages, and the average person, 90% of the people have blood levels of vitamin D that are too low. So if your blood level of D is low, you are going to be at higher risk of developing every major disease like heart disease and cancer and diabetes, and your risk for infection goes through the roof. Again, go to stopcovidcold.com and you've got all the science there to support this. This is not idle speculation. This is well-established, peer-reviewed literature. So
fantastic. Well, and we got to look out for your book. Your book is releasing, I think, next month, right? In April?
Yeah, April. The third week. I think April somewhere. The third week.
All right, there it is. The truth about.
Hopefully, it won't compete with the additional censorship. I'm not sure if you're aware now, but Amazon has banned like Dr. Seuss books in the future, like near future. So the top 10 selling books are Dr. Seuss books.
This is the world we live in, but you're still hopeful.
I'm very hopeful. I'm beyond hopeful. I'm excited. I just know the outcome is going to be good. So it looks bad now, but it really isn't. If you understand the deep underlying principles here. As I said, I'm aligning some very clever, sophisticated, technical individuals, and there's large money. We're talking 10-figure amount of money that's backing this project. So more than that, actually. So it's a big long-term project, but it's going to be successful because we're going to beat these guys at their own game. It's still a David versus Goliath, but when you've got the truth on your side, how can you not win? The more people who see the truth, the more that will wake up and find that there are alternatives to what this mainstream brainwash propaganda is doing to them.
Well, Dr. Mercola, you are a visionary. You are, a pioneer and a leader, and it's been an honor to get you to download on us some of this brilliant information.
Well, thank you for having me. I appreciate the opportunity.
Absolutely. Check out the book coming out in April, and definitely get to that website where you'll get more details on what oils, what foods, what vitamins. All of that is covered in detail. And one of the best, I think, sort of searchable websites when you're really looking for information. Dr. Mercola's got that laid out in ways that you can really search for what you're looking for if you're having ailments. So, Dr. Mercola, all the best in that sunshiny state there in Florida. Keep up the great work, and we look forward to having you on again soon.
All right. Well, thank you, Del. Appreciate it.
All right. Take care. Well, unfortunately, we don't live in a place like Poland where they actually push back against censorship and fine social media companies that keep us from, being able to inform the public of what's taking place. Yeah, here in America, as you just found out, Congress actually wants to censor us more and make sure that you don't hear any of the truth that's going on. That's what the Highwire is here for, and that's why we've got a very important story right now to talk about. One of the things that you probably won't see in your social media, but you should know about, especially if you live in Connecticut, is the fact that Connecticut is going to attempt to remove your religious exemptions from vaccines. I'm talking about SB 568 and HB 6423. Now, fortunately, some really brilliant people have put together a petition. Take a look at what this petition says. It's a petition to Governor Ned Lamont, 5 reasons to veto SB 568 and HB 6423. Let's go through those reasons. It says, reason number 1, according to Connecticut's own survey data, there's no problem to solve in Connecticut schools. This bill is unnecessary government overreach. Reason number 2, unlike New York or California, Connecticut is a religious liberty leader. Reason number 3, vaccine mandates violate human rights and lead to discrimination of the religious. Reason number 4, vaccine mandates violate international bioethics standards, which prioritize the individual over the state. And reason number 5, don't create another reason for families to leave Connecticut. Well, that's probably the best reason of all of them when you think about these states that are just having a mass exodus. That's what landed me in Texas. I'm a refugee from California where they had SB 277, SB 276, all of those things that took away our rights. But to talk about this, I'm bringing in a really good friend and one of the great warriors that are out there. Kevin Berry Esquire was a co-author on this petition. Kevin Berry, what's going on in Connecticut? I felt like this was over. Didn't we already do this? It's like Groundhog Day. It keeps coming back around. What's going on in Connecticut?
Yeah, thanks for covering the story, Del. And Connecticut, we almost had it beat last year, but the whole bill got derailed by COVID when the legislature shut down. So this year, when the legislature reconvened, the same people brought it up. Only they did it a little bit dirtier in that they removed some of the Democrats from the committee who were opposed to the repeal, so it would have a greater chance of passing. And what we keep seeing around the country, this isn't necessarily a partisan comment, it's just reading the votes, is that it's a Democrat, the Democratic Party via party line votes seems to be passing these bills. And on this committee in Connecticut, there's 34 people, 23 Democrats and 11 Republicans, and so far in the committee, each of the votes have been 23-11 straight party lines. So that's one of the inspirations for why we're taking this to the governor.
So this is those same shenanigans we saw in California, where it looked like we were going to beat SB 277. They stop everything down. They remove what were obviously no votes on the bill. We saw this happen up in New York, and now it's happening in Connecticut. I wasn't really deeply involved in politics till I got into this issue, but I'm curious, when you got involved with legislation, did you really expect it would, that there's this type of corruption? I thought there was debates. I thought we had all sides represented. I thought, let the best man win, but let's all, put our chips on the table. But they literally remove, and in this case, you have Democrats that are against it. It's not, we can't just generalize the entire party, but they go ahead and remove those voices from their own party in these committees. Is this what you expected when you, sort of started getting involved in the politics of this?
Well, I knew it was dirty, but I expected it to be more backroom deals than right out in the open. In New York, as is on video, where they did a strong arm of one person and changed the 1313 vote that would have killed the bill, and passed it. That was in real time.
Wow.
In New Jersey, it would have died in committee in New Jersey, except the Senate president of New Jersey substituted in three different votes on the day of the vote. He substituted 3 Dems that were in favor of the repeal. And again, Connecticut should not aspire to be as dirty as Trenton and Albany.
And luckily, I just want to say on New Jersey's behalf, even though it got through committee, there was somewhere between 5,000 and 10,000 of us showed up to stand outside of that Capitol all day chanting. And it was amazing, right? They kept sequestering one politician, trying to get that one politician to change his vote. And so we started chanting that politician's name, let him know we knew what was going on, and it worked. I mean, but boy, was that a heavy lift, and it shouldn't be necessary if this system was designed to actually be fair. So, you know, you've written this brilliant petition. I think you've laid it out very clearly. I'm curious about this idea. You said, you know, unlike California and New York, Connecticut is a religious sort of freedom leader. What do you mean by that? What is special about Connecticut?
I think, well, when you think of like religious freedom is an American invention, right? And before we were a country, New England is where the Puritans went. The people fled Europe to come to the New World to be more religious, right? They weren't fleeing religious persecution. They were fleeing secular society, a more secular society, to come here and be more religious. And the states that were the 3 states that was most prevalent were Massachusetts, Rhode Island, and Connecticut in New England, and then Pennsylvania also with the Quakers, right? But New York always then and now was more of a commercial center. Like New York wasn't like a holy roller place, but New England was, and Pennsylvania is, and California, just being on the West Coast, was 100 years late to the party relative to the founding of the country.
I don't think California's ever really been religious at all. If I was
not
at least since we probably killed all of the Native Americans off of it that were, you know, had a practicing religion.
Right. So to me, it's more offensive that Connecticut's taken away religious freedom.
Right.
It shouldn't be coming from and the license plate is the Constitution state, right? And the first thing in the First Amendment is religious freedom.
Yeah.
So, it's more absurd that it's coming away from Connecticut. But one thing I wanted to mention: we know how much pressure there is on the elected senators and assembly people from their party bosses. Right? You know who doesn't have pressure from the party boss? The governor. Right. So that's part of the inspiration for this, because the governor can, you know, read these very reasonable points and say, this is not, he doesn't need a better parking spot. He doesn't need to be on a committee to send business to his law firm. You know, he's in a position where he can say, you know, this is foolish. Yeah, don't even do this. Don't put this on my desk, or we're going to have a problem. I mean, better to really don't create religious freedom refugees, right? And if you think of it in the opposite, if he came out tomorrow and said, while I'm governor, the religious exemption will be in place no matter what the party does, Connecticut would fill up. Connecticut would be the next Florida. From New York, New Jersey. It would be the most densely populated state in the nation. You might come from Texas to Connecticut, right? Right. You know, but it's true. Well, especially up there in the East Coast, right? You're going to need somewhere. You're going to need an island up there somewhere, a safe place, you know, home base. It's like tag out there. You know, you got to get to the big tree. Connecticut should be that. So let me ask you, just very quickly, you know, this was shut down, the vote last year, because of COVID. Do you feel like COVID and the COVID vaccine, you got about 50% of the country pushing back against this vaccine, including nurses, doctors. Do you feel like the COVID issue is going to help this bill push through in Connecticut, or do you think it's going to hurt it? It's hard to tell at this point. I think it's absolutely helped grow our numbers, you know, because everyone knows it's about to, and the Connecticut leadership has said when COVID's available for children, they're going to add it. So everyone knows that's coming down the pike. So I would say very much increased our numbers, but it also has kind of increased the resolve of the other side, because they know the rebellion's growing, right? So they have to hurry up and cut it off at the pass, right? Yeah. And I think also that they did their own survey and found out the number of religious exemptions have gone down. Numbers of religious exemptions have gone down. And since 1959, when Connecticut first had the religious exemption, it's been a peaceful coexistence between the religious exemption and vaccine mandates without outbreaks of any kind of infectious disease. So it's not an either or game. You can have both. Yeah. Right? There's no problem that needs solving.
Absolutely. Really great points. Yeah. Go ahead.
I know we're running. I know we got time constraints, but the ethics question always really angers me. And you and I have talked about this privately. But the bioethics standard prioritizes the individual over the state. And that came out of World War II. That came out of atrocities. That came out of Dr. Mengele. That came out of atrocities in Japan on American POWs and Chinese people. Yeah. And there's a reason like that the entire globe on ethics has an informed consent standard. It's because when the state takes over instead of the individual, bad things happen.
Yeah, I mean it's certainly not a republic. It's not a democracy at that point. Now you have some form of a dictatorship or authoritarian regime. I mean, this is where things are moving if we don't do something about it. So how do we help out? We want to do something about it. What's the best website to go to? How do we help out with this petition?
Well, it's Informed Choice Connecticut has it on its homepage. I think we have about 3,000 people right now.
Great.
And those are mostly Connecticut. But we want the rest of the country. We want the rest of the world. We want other countries. Like Connecticut's a nice place to live. Yeah. So keep it viable, right? For as a place for people to move to. There's an increasing number of states that people have to draw red X's to. They can't live there, right? Because of the vaccine exemption laws, and that's very disturbing.
Agreed, and I think that's in when you think in petitions, it's one of the reasons we all should sign it, because we're all looking for those states that are going to stand up for rights. I mean, Idaho's booming, Florida booming, Texas booming, but there's a lot more of us. We need a few more states to open up and be free. And so, if some of us that want to be in the East Coast, Connecticut, let's put our energy and our pressure there. For all of us, we want to sort of create these islands of a sanctuary that still recognizes the thing that's on the license plate in Connecticut, which is the Constitution of the United States of America. Kevin, you are a warrior. You're out there fighting tirelessly, bringing these cases to the courts. I want to thank you for that work. We will definitely support you in all this and keep us posted as this, sort of whatever happens in the future as this moves forward.
Thank you so much, Del, and thank you for covering this. You're one of the few independent journalists left on the planet, and God bless you.
All right. Thank you very much.
Yeah.
We'll see you soon.
Cheers.
Take care, Kevin.
All right.
All of the different ways. I mean, First Amendment is just under siege, censorship, right to assemble, the right to freedom of religion. All of these things are such a big deal. And we're seeing this, we say it all the time, right? It's like a science fiction movie or a book like Brave New World or 1984, Fahrenheit 451. These are the COVID times. I mean, how are they going to write about this? And, when we think about those times, what parts of our life it's affecting, I mean, on one hand, we're losing our right to control what's injected into our children. But what happens if it starts affecting our ability to even hold our children, hold our babies, or be with our children? This is something that a lot of people are, experiencing in the middle of the COVID epidemic, a change to how we handle families in times of crisis, in times in the hospital. Take a look at what's happening to a lot of people around this country.
The virus is posing a big risk to mothers-to-be and their newborns.
Doctors say they are making tough choices to keep babies safe.
New mothers facing unprecedented challenges amid the COVID-19 pandemic.
Imagine meeting your newborn over video, and we're not talking about adoption.
According to the CDC, babies who are born to mothers with suspected or confirmed COVID-19 should be considered infected themselves, and both should be separated anywhere from 72 hours up to 1 week.
Charlotte, born too early, was put into an isolette to head to the NICU. Stephanie got to see her face for a moment. Then Charlotte was wheeled away.
As soon as the baby is born, they do bring him right to us outside of the door, so it's just a very brief moment that the mom might get a glimpse.
Nurses set up special video chats with Charlotte.
Oh, it's all right. Oh. Yeah, that was sad. Yeah, it was just because it was like, you know, what could I have done better?
La Leche League USA told USA Today that separation at birth could have lasting effects on both mother and baby.
It's very difficult. I can't even imagine what these moms with this are facing with that.
You can't even imagine what that wait must have been like for those moms, and we cannot forget all of the new moms in this country caught in the middle of this.
Obviously, this is a huge growing issue in America, probably around the world in the times of COVID here. Parents having their babies taken away, testing positive, even though children and babies don't spread this. We're not even sure in many ways these babies have any receptors for COVID-19. It's one of the things that makes this disease interesting. Flu might be a problem, but certainly COVID-19 is not proven to be. But these stories are starting to grow. And I had an opportunity just a couple of days ago to have a Zoom call with a family that has just been through this experience. I'm joined by Roy and Loretta right now that had this experience just a few days ago in the hospital. Roy, Loretta, obviously you're sitting there. We've got baby Ezekiel back, but it hasn't been easy, has it?
No, it hasn't.
You know, they're, in a sense, almost kidnapping your child and not allowing you to see him in a case that I don't think the data really backs up the decisions that they're making.
Do you have any other children?
No, this is our first child.
So that must add to it also, right? You haven't been through this process before, so it was all so new.
Yeah, definitely. You know, this was the first time that we've ever dealt with a hospital. It's our first child. We grew up in an old order Mennonite community. You know, a lot of new things, a lot of very new things for both of us.
All along, we were planning on having a home birth. So we basically had everything set up and ready to have the baby here at home. But unfortunately, I ended up having a 30-hour labor, and I was just not dilated far enough to have the baby at home. The midwife and both Roy and I kind of decided, well, you know what, we're going to go to the hospital. And then when we got to the hospital where things kind of took us for a loop.
You know, they hooked her up to the monitors, and I would say in a matter of 5 minutes, they were saying, look, we need to do a C-section now. And I was like, oh, wow, what just happened?
So you have a successful C-section. Then what took place? I mean, at that point, I'm assuming you want to hold your baby, maybe, just try and connect.
Maybe after 10 minutes or so, they moved the baby over to Loretta's chest to give it, skin to skin, because that's something that doctors even realize is very, very important. Is those first 24 hours and those first days. It's very, very important for the child to feel connected to his parents.
From there, they took his blood sugar and it was very low, and just like that, now looking back, I'm like, wow, it just feels like they tore him out of my arms.
They take him off to the NICU. Then after they had settled her in, they came in and they wanted to do a test on her.
So Loretta, you get a COVID test. How long did it take to get the results of that test?
I think it was an hour.
And what was the results?
It was positive.
Did you have any symptoms prior to that?
I had no symptoms, and so that's why I was very shocked when they came back and said, you tested positive for COVID.
Are you aware that those are incredibly inaccurate?
Yeah, just hearing through other people how they go about to do these tests, I realized that they're not accurate.
So then at what point did they let you know that you are not going to be able to be in contact with your baby?
I think it was soon after they told us that I tested positive for COVID, and I believe Roy had said something, how soon can we go over to the NICU to see our son, and then from there they said, no, you can't because of me testing positive.
Tell me what that moment was like hearing that.
For me, looking back, I feel like it didn't hit reality.
As soon as I heard that we couldn't be with him, I immediately went to work to see what we could, if there's any option for us to be with our son.
Did they tell you the whole time that there was a finish line, that after this many days you'll be negative and everything will be okay? I mean, did you have a sense of how long you're going to be waiting to see your son?
You know, what they told us from the start was 10 days, but we didn't feel that that was acceptable. I don't think I've ever felt as much emotional pain till I almost, till my chest physically hurt because of the fact of not being able to be with my son, not being able to be there for him when he needed me the most.
I would definitely say it was very hard. The first days of his life are very important for him to connect with his mom and dad as well. And so it was heartbreaking not being able to be with my son and just being able to love on him, and just seeing Roy as a father being torn apart. That was very hard for me as well to see that.
While Ezekiel was in the NICU, were you having to sign off on things that they were doing? Was he given any vaccines or any drugs or antibiotics?
He was put on antibiotics almost immediately when he went to the NICU, and we were not informed of that before it happened. The doctor came into our room and said, I think it was the premature white blood cell counts are high and his blood platelets are low, and this is a sign of infection, and we're going to put him, we have him on antibiotics. And I was not happy with that at all. We really felt like if he could just be with mom, then everything would kind of, work itself out, rather than, all these other things that they're trying to do to get him to regulate his own blood sugar. If he could just be with mom and, have that connection with mom, that would be what would be the most helpful. But that wasn't an option to them, I guess.
A few days ago, you finally got baby Ezekiel back. Was that exactly at that 10-day period from your COVID test?
It was 11 days. It was like 36 hours after we got to be with him, he got released.
And so how is baby Ezekiel doing now?
He's doing very well. I mean, he's definitely showing the strong side of Ezekiel.
Is there anything that that you think is important for people to know that, as I said, are going to be going through a similar experience?
I am still looking into how this situation can help other people, because I don't think it's right that the COVID data, it doesn't warrant the things that we're doing.
For this coronavirus, we know that Ezekiel really was never in any risk, and so the question really is, why aren't you being able to make contact with that baby? Why can't they present a situation where you can be with your child, since you're not putting your child at risk? It doesn't seem right. And hopefully by people like you sharing your story the way you have, other families, I think, will think about how they would handle that and be prepared, right? The hardest thing is when these things catch us by surprise.
We never dreamt of preparing for something like this, that what you said, catch us by surprise, and we need to kind of keep running just to be up to speed, and then to think of all the other things that are happening.
Do you have insurance that's covering all of those bills? Because that can be very expensive.
That was another part of our upbringing where we really didn't have insurance. We relied more on, should we say, church insurance, and we left the fellowship where we grew up, and that was a part of our life that we're still, figuring out in a sense. That's going to be another part of the journey that it's going to be interesting. Maybe going forward in the future, we probably would try and get some insurance, but we didn't have any at this point.
We've got a great audience here of caring people that believe in natural health and want to help, I think, get involved where they can. And so for those of you out there that are hearing this story, they've put up a GoFundMe. Look, hopefully you can move on and have a blessed rest of your lives. I hope you'll keep us posted, send us cards once in a while so we can see how baby Ezekiel's doing as he grows up. I'm glad you're all together, and you have the rest of your lives to move beyond this experience.
and that's the exciting part. You know, it was 10 days, but you know that those were the first 10 days, and us as parents to father and mother the child is a lifetime experience. So we look forward to moving forward and keeping this behind us and not affecting our lives.
Even though it was 10 days, it seemed like forever. Everyone that was praying for us, and even just the strength of God that was there with us, I feel very strongly that helped us get through it.
I'm glad you're together, and thank you for sharing your story.
Thank you for having us, and thank you for giving us the opportunity to, impact the lives of others through all of this.
That's what it's all about, right?
Yeah. Thank you for having us.
You bet. You guys take care. Well, obviously, there's been all sorts of protests and information sessions, as many of the people call them, waving signs, talking about the issues around vaccines at different events, stadiums, things like that. Well, now, Senator Richard Pan in California, who first brought SB 277 to the forefront. This was the law that took away all of the exemptions, whether religious or philosophical exemptions from vaccinations for children going into public or private school. This is really what threw me into the middle of this conversation and changed my life forever. In fact, I think Senator Richard Pan is responsible for igniting the vaccine risk awareness movement around the world. Had there never been an SB 277 that attacked this very small group of people that were just quietly living their lives, deciding they wanted to raise their children without injecting them with toxic chemicals and live viruses and bacteria, go figure, that they actually wanted to raise their children with organic food and clean water and good living and exercise, they would have just gone on with their lives, not said anything to anyone. But when Richard Pan brought SB 277 to light, he attacked a small group of people that suddenly had to defend themselves. Think about this. We're talking back in 2015, 2016, when all of this was coming to light. He created a movement that had to defend their lifestyle, had to say, well, now that you're attacking us, we're going to explain who we are and why we live the way we do. And from that moment, we were at about maybe 2 or 3% of people that were not vaccinating their children, as they said. And now we find ourselves in the middle of a COVID pandemic with a coronavirus vaccine that nearly 50% of doctors are saying they won't get. You want to talk about a movement that has grown exponentially? We only have Senator Richard Pan to thank, but now he's up to his usual shenanigans. Now he wants to destroy your First Amendment right to assemble. And this is his brand new bill. This is SB 742. Let me just give you the basic idea of it. SB 742 says this: the people of the state of California do enact as follows. It is unlawful, except upon private property, for a person to engage in physical obstruction, intimidation, or picketing targeted at a vaccination site during the time period beginning 1 hour prior to the vaccination services beginning and ending 1 hour after the conclusion of the vaccination services. A violation of subdivision A is punishable by a fine not exceeding $1,000, imprisonment in a county jail not exceeding 6 months, or by both that fine and imprisonment. It goes on with a bunch of other details, but clearly he doesn't want anyone standing outside of a vaccination site any longer with signs that say things like, the manufacturers of vaccines do not have liability. They're protected from liability. Or, did you know that the coronavirus vaccine is not FDA approved? These types of truths and facts he doesn't want to be available to people walking into a vaccination site. I'm honored to be joined by really, I think, the leader of this sort of physical ground game of the vaccine risk awareness movement, Joshua Coleman. Josh, can you hear me?
I can hear you.
Josh,
thanks for having me on.
You know, as soon as I saw this bill, and sometimes they name them, I really honestly thought to myself, Pan might as well just call this the Josh Coleman bill. I mean, this is, the two of you have been at it, and if people haven't followed this history, there's been lawsuits back and forth between you. He's touched you, as I understand. You haven't touched him, but we won't get into those details. I want to talk about, you've had this amazing campaign. We've had you on before. You really gave the vaccine risk awareness movement a look. These beautiful signs, black, red, and white. You're supplying them all over the country. to these different rallies and events. But what did you think? First of all, what do you know about this bill? I mean, you live in California. This is your home turf. You live in Sacramento, actually, right where all of these things are decided. What do we need to know about Bill 742?
Well, as you know, the Vias for Vaccine campaign was sort of built out of, being shadow banned and censored online. And so we said, we're going to go out and publicly educate. They can't stop us. And here comes Senator Pan saying, hold my beer. And he introduces this bill, and it's going to keep anyone from demonstrating within proximity of anywhere where they're administering vaccinations. So we've been concentrating on the COVID-19 vaccination areas since December. We launched a new campaign, and we have these flyers and signs that directly talk about the risks there are with the COVID-19 vaccination. And so now we won't be able to go out there if this bill passes into law. And not only that, but this is anywhere where they're administering vaccinations. So a pharmacy, a grocery store, a Walgreens. I know Target is supposed to start giving out vaccinations in their dressing rooms. So this is going to greatly limit the places that we can go out and educate and demonstrate. And I guess they're piggybacking off of a bill called SB 661, which had previously targeted the Westboro Baptist Church. And that's, of course, the church that would go and harass fallen soldiers and homosexuals' funerals with ugly, awful signs that say, burn in hell, and other phrases I wouldn't want to repeat, which is very different than what we do.
Right.
We are very adamant about our activists being very well-behaved and smiling at people and never blocking. And it's Senator Pan is calling us domestic terrorists. And really, it's all about education.
So, what's interesting about this is obviously you've been helping with these rallies all across the country. Amazing job. And the overpasses, just brilliant, tactics of informing the public, which is something that you and I have, we've been at this from the beginning with Vaxxed. But what I find ironic is really the event that made it in the news, that sort of gave the inertia, the energy behind Pan to really say they're blocking us at the engine, picketing, engaging in physical obstruction, which is something I've never seen you do. That all came from an event at Dodger Stadium that happened on February 27th. Were you at that event at Dodger Stadium?
No, I wasn't there. My campaign, the Vias for Vaccine campaign, was not used there. And right off the bat, it made national and then international news. And I started to look and see, was there anybody there I know? And I was shocked to find out no one I know was involved in that demonstration, that protest. The organizer I've never met before. And that's rare. It is, in fact, that never happens. I always know at least one person at one of these demonstrations. Now, I have sought out some of the people, and I've talked to two of the people that were at that demonstration, and they say that they never blocked traffic, that they just opted to shut the gates for about an hour and then open them back up. I don't know whether that's true or not, but regardless of anything, there's already laws in place to stop people from blocking traffic. That is against the law. That is illegal. I find it interesting that nobody was arrested in that situation, but we don't need additional laws. And of course, we would never encourage our activists to do anything like that. And Vias for Vaccine has been happening for almost 2 years now, and no one's ever done anything like that. And it's awful that that's happened, and it really almost seems like it may have been a setup of some kind.
Well, obviously, these are the things that we're always questioning, right? And it's impossible in many ways. None of us have the resources to do deep investigations. We have to imagine somewhere out there, someone's probably infiltrating or starting. I just watched, I don't know if you watched the film about the Chicago 7, but I think about them on trial. And it's funny, in the trial, all of a sudden, all these people that were amongst them ended up having been police officers and FBI informants. But not to be paranoid, clearly what I do, I find it incredibly weird that you don't know anybody that was at that event. I don't know anybody that was at that event. And for us, this is it's a growing, booming movement. But, the people that sort of drive these events and give it energy, we know all of those people. We've run into all of them at some point. It's sort of like when I hear that Russian bots have been driving the, anti-vaccine message. I was like, I haven't come across a single Russian or a Russian bot. that? How is it all I do is work on the vaccine issue online, and I've never come across something that I said, I don't know who this is, or like it's from Russia? I mean, I don't know what they're talking about. But I think what's scarier here is, again, we're living in a time of censorship. They are kicking, all of us off of social media sites. You were smart to really not make all of your, put all of your energy into, broadcasting social media. You've got the ground game going, but now they realize they've got to stop that too. And so we're talking about, this is all the collapse of our First Amendment. If we have no freedom of speech, if we're being censored, right to assemble, all of these issues, do you think they're going to get away with it? And what's it going to take for PAN to pass this in California?
Well, there's an urgency statute on this bill, which means that, normally these bills, if they're passed, they'll become law the next year. Well, with an urgency statute, it becomes law immediately if this is passed. There is one advantage to that. PAN has to have a 2/3 vote in order to pass this. So he'll need every single Democrat voting yes on it if we have all the conservatives voting no. So, there is definitely some hope there, and we're really hoping to stop this from happening. If it does, if this goes through, it's not only going to stop us from protesting in these areas. If you think about it, there's all these protests outside Planned Parenthood that happen all over California. Well, they vaccinate for HPV at the Planned Parenthood location, so that's going to end any kind of pro-life protests out there. And Black Lives Matter. They're not going to be able to go out and demonstrate. And I also find it interesting that Senator Pan was caught. There's a photograph floating around of him marching with Black Lives Matter in the street, blocking traffic. So I guess in some situations it's okay to do that, but in others not so much.
What can people do to help out with this? What do you want to see happen in California? And can we help out if we're not living in California?
Yes, absolutely. And people outside of California do need to understand that these things pass here and then they spread. So this, even though it's just affecting California, it could be your state next. And so we need to really apply pressure and start calling our Democrat constituents and everybody at the Capitol that we can, and really encourage them to vote no on this bill, and bringing up that this will also impact Black Lives Matter, because I think the Democrats will respond to that more so than from our cause. But they can't shut down protests. And certainly, if this becomes a law, somebody may have to get arrested and take that to the Supreme Court. So it'll be interesting to see how this plays out.
Absolutely. Well, Josh, once again, it's great. Thank you for bringing such clarity to this issue. California, it is sort of as California goes, the world goes. We hope not. I think many of us have fled there. You're staying behind to fight the good fight, as many in California have. So keep up the good work. And to me, I think that I hope you recognize that this type of attack on what you're doing, when we've lost every social media platform that I originally broadcast on, I only see that as verification that what we're doing is working. And they obviously see that the work that you're doing is working. And I think it goes without saying, you have not been violent, you haven't been in anyone's face, you don't block things, because that goes against the point. What you're trying to do is enroll people and help inform them. And obviously, if you're just pissing them off, that doesn't gain any ground. So keep up the good work. I think the message is brilliant. Again, the way you've given it a look. And we're here to support you guys. Keep me posted on how this goes.
Right on. Thanks so much, Del.
All right. Take care, Josh. Well, from all sides, whether it's a Joe Mercola that has been bringing about health information for decades now, or a Joshua Coleman who, because of an injury to his son, got involved in trying to wake up other people so that they wouldn't go through the same experience that he had. These people have stepped forward. They've stepped forward from the beginning of time. Our civilization, our evolution as civilizations moves forward because of people that care about each other and care about freedom and stand up to represent something. And so as we look at what is taking place now, I think each one of us has to ask ourselves, who am I? What is my role in this? What am I going to do? for many, if you simply are just sharing the Highwire so that everyone you know is getting to hear from Dr. Mercola and Joshua Coleman and all the great work that Jeffrey Jackson is doing and the reports that nobody else is bringing you. Before you put your family on a rocket ship to Mars, why don't we make sure the rocket ship works? Why don't we make sure that there's oxygen and some way to breathe once we get to Mars? And should things not work on Mars, we should definitely be able to get off of Mars and get home. And if we are on a one-way ticket to nowhere with no understanding of the long-term effects of those decisions, then don't we all need to stand up and let people know? Don't we all need to stand up and inform, whether you call that a protest? No one's blocking anything. We are celebrating the opening of people's minds. This is what the Highwire is dedicated to. This is all of the great experts and specialists and doctors and scientists, virologists, world-renowned experts that are coming onto our show to share what no one else is allowing them to share, the truth. We are celebrating the truth. Look inside yourself and say, what can I do today to make the world a more truthful place? Think about that this week, and we'll see you next week on The Highwire. Thanks for watching, and thanks to the Highwire insiders who make this show possible. If you'd like to become a Highwire insider, then go to our website, thehighwire.com, and sign up now. And please, share the show. We're on Instagram, Twitter, BitChute, and now on Roku. Because knowledge is power, censorship is real, and we need all the help we can get.